Michael Ingham EPIP assessment. I did play 9 for the orange and white team. His strengths were tackling, because in the preparation stage he had his feet shoulder width apart, his knees slightly bent and he was bent over the hip. His back was straight and his shoulders were back. He was also looking up through with his head up, in case the player took a side step, he could see which way he went. This position is known as the Tower of Power, which is also used in rucking and in scrummaging, because it gives you a low centre of mass and therefore makes you stable. In the execution stage, depending on which shoulder he tackled with, he took a step in with his leading foot. So if he tackled with his right shoulder, he'd take a step in with his right foot, and if he was going to tackle with his left shoulder, he'd take a step in with his left foot. Then when he made contact with the opposition, he made contact around the waist area with his shoulder, and then wrapped his arms around the opposition's legs, which therefore made him unable to move. And because he took this step in when he went to make the tackle, it allows him to drive on, and therefore the opposition doesn't gain as many yards and possibly loses yards. In the recovery stage, he then got up, released the man, and then jackled using the Tower of Power position again. Jackling is where you try and regain the ball back before any of the opposition are there to ruck you out. Another skill was his passing off his left. In the preparation stage, he had his right foot on line with the top of the ball and his left leg outstretched pointing towards the man receiving the ball. He also had a bend in his right knee, and he had his right hand on the bottom half of the ball, his left hand on the top half of the ball, and he had his head over the ball. During the execution stage, he transferred his weight from his right leg to his left leg, and with no back lift, he pushed the ball through, spinning it with his right hand and guiding it with his left hand, and finishing with his arms pointing at the man receiving the ball. In the recovery stage, he then followed the ball so he could keep up with play and reach the next ruck quickly. One of his components of fitness, which was his strengths, was he had good cardiovascular endurance. This is especially important for a scrum half, because a scrum half dictates the pace of the game, so he needs to get to the rucks, and if he wants to slow the game down, then he'll tell the forwards to pick and go, or use a crash ball, or if he wants quick play, then he'd pass it out to the 10 and he'd pass it out wide. Another component of fitness which was good was his muscular power, and you notice this when he when he ran into contact, and he either broke the line or gained yards by driving his legs forward. One of his tactics which was good was that he knew when to apply a box kick in the game. You usually apply a box kick when you can't break through the line of defence, or there is a gap between the first line of defence and the second line of defence. The second line of defence being when both wingers and fullback are deep. Ideally, you want to get as much height as possible, and only kick it about 20 metres, so it gives your team time to either retain the ball or apply pressure onto the other team. However, one of his weaknesses was actually performing the box kick. The reason, however, in the preparation stage it was good, as he had, like in a pass, he had his right foot on line with the top of the ball and his left leg outstretched pointing towards his own try line. He had a bend in his right leg and all of his weight over this leg. He had his right foot on the bottom half of the ball and his left hand on the top half of the ball. However, during the execution stage, he took a step into and brought his right leg on level with his left leg, and instead of kicking the ball on the bottom point to gain height, he kicked it on the top half of the ball, which meant that he got little height and made the kick more into a grubber kick, which meant the ball bounced more easily towards the wingers and the fullback, and when they retained the ball, they were able to gain gain speed and gain more yards than they should have done if the kick had height to it. Another weakness of his was his passing off his right. During the preparation stage, he had his left foot on line with the top half of the ball and his right leg outstretched, which is good. Also, he had his left hand on the bottom half of the ball, his right hand on the top half of the ball. However, during the execution stage, instead of passing it with no back lift, he picked up the ball and took a few steps and then passed it. And this is a negative at this age and this level, because as soon as you have two hands on the ball and it's picked up off the floor, then the opposition are allowed to come up off their defensive line. It's especially important at scrums, because again at this level, the scrum half is allowed to come round the side of the scrum, and as soon as the scrum half has two hands on the ball and picks it up, he's allowed to tackle you. A component of fitness which was his weakness was his speed. Although he had good cardiovascular endurance and was able to keep up with the pace of the game, he sometimes struggled to get to the rucks, and this left the ball with the forwards, who sometimes slowed the ball down by taking it into contact or using a crash ball when there was space out wide, where if the scrum half would have passed it out wide to the 10. Because of these pick and goes and crash balls, it meant that the defence had time to realign and the space out wide was gone. The tactic which I picked out was his pick and goes. He sometimes called pick and goes, again when there was space out wide, which slowed the tempo of the game down and allowed the defence to realign. It's good to use pick and goes to draw the defence in to one side of the pitch and then pass it out. However, he did them in the middle of the pitch and kept going different ways. Ideally, you want to keep going the same way so the defence keep coming towards one way and it creates space out wide. The one major weakness that I identified was his passing off his right. Over a 5-week training programme, I will do one 30-minute programme a week during his 1 hour and a half training sessions. The first week shall be testing. The first test that I shall do, I'll have a sheet over the bottom half of the rugby posts with a hole in the middle, and this hole shall be the target. I'll place 10 balls 10 metres away and get the scrum half to pass the ball off the floor, off his right hand, and see how many he gets through this target. The next test I'll do, I'll have 10 balls, I'll get him to pass them as fast as he can with a good degree of accuracy. After this, I shall see how far he can pass them with the same degree of accuracy, and after all these tests are completed, I shall record the results and review them in the final week when we do retesting. In the second week, I will be working on technique. So the ideal technique for passing off to the right hand is to have your left foot on line with the top half of the ball, your right leg outstretched pointing towards the man receiving the ball, a slight bend in your left knee, your left hand on the bottom half of the ball and your right hand on the top half of the ball, and finally your head over the ball. During the execution stage, you want to transfer your weight from your left leg to your right leg, and with your arms slightly bent at the start, you push them to near full extension whilst spinning the ball with your left hand and guiding it with your right hand, and finish with your arms fully outstretched, pointing at the man receiving the ball. During the recovery stage, you should follow the ball so you keep up with play. For the first drill that I shall do, I shall have 3 channels made out of cones, one which shall be parallel with the ball, so flat and on line with it. This would be for when a forward is maybe taking a crash ball or anyone else is taking a crash ball. The second channel shall be at 45 degrees to the ball. This is usually the angle at which number 10 shall stand when receiving the ball, when he wants to pass it out wide through the hands or use some moves. And the final channel shall be at 70 degrees, which is where a 10 or another player would stand if he wants to clear the ball and kick it. So firstly, I shall have 10 balls and have a receiver stand 10 metres away in the first channel, which is online, with the ball. I shall get him to pass these 10 balls to the receiver, and I shall do the same with the other 2 channels. This shall be distributed practice, so I can give him positive reinforcement, which will strengthen the SR bond. After he has passed these 30 balls to the channels, I shall do the exercise again. However, this time it shall be mass practice, so the skill can be grooved. For the 3rd week, I shall be doing passing under pressure. I'll be doing the same drill as the 2nd week, so I'll have 3 channels, 1 flat, 1 at 45 degrees and 1 at 70 degrees. However, this time, in front of the ball, I shall place a tackle pad, which will represent a scrum. As I said before, at this level, as soon as you have 2 hands on the ball and it's picked up off the floor, the opposite 9 is allowed to come round at a scrum and tackle you. Therefore, you need to be able to pass the ball off the floor in 1 movement. So I shall have the receiver stood 10 metres away in the first grid, which is the flat one, and I shall get the scrum half to pass 10 balls off his right hand off the floor to the receiver. I shall do the same for the other 2 channels, and again this shall be distributed practice, so I can give him positive reinforcement and feedback on how he can improve the skill. After this drill, I shall introduce a defender opposite the first receiver, and again get the scrum half to pass 10 balls to each channel and see how long the receiver has to either take the ball in or pass it out wide. From this, we can then see how far the receiver would have to stand in a match, so they have enough time to perform their skill. In the 4th week, I shall be working on moves from the 9 position. So I will set up a 15 by 15 metre grid and do 3 versus 2 with 3 attackers and 2 defenders. The scrum half shall always start with the ball on the left hand side of the grid, and I shall get them to run through the drill 10 times and see how many times they score. After this, I shall take them out, put them in an attacking diagonal line with the scrum half starting with the ball, passing it right. I shall then teach them the miss pass. So I shall get the scrum half to pass the ball around 15 metres to a receiver and use distributed practice, so I can teach him, so I can give him feedback on how he could pass the ball more accurately. After he's able to perform this skill, I'll get another player to run in between the scrum half and the receiver, and he shall be running a dummy crash ball line. The reason why I'm teaching them this skill is because in matches, if you do a few crash balls, it draws the defenders in. So if they saw another crash ball going to happen, all the defenders would draw in. However, and then you pass the ball behind this dummy runner to the 10. It leaves lots of space out wide for him to either chip it over the top or pass it out wide. I would then put them back into the 3 versus 2 drill, get them to run the test 10 more times using hands and also the miss pass, and see how many times they score. After these 10 times, I shall take them out of the drill again, put them in the attacking line of 3, with the scrum half starting with the ball on the floor, pass it to his right, and I shall work on the loop pass. I shall get the scrum half to pass the ball to the first receiver and then follow the ball. When he is vertically on line with the first receiver, he shall receive the ball back off the player, which will then create a 2 versus 1 on the last defender. The reason why you would do this in a match is because it will draw the inside centre and the 10 into the opposition inside centre and the 10 towards your first receiver, once the scrum half receives the ball again, the attacking team shall have an overlap and therefore is more likely to score. So after they've done this, I shall put them back in the drill and get them to perform it again. So they shall be using hands, miss pass and a loop pass. This is varied practice, and the reason for this is because the environment is constantly changing, and the reason why I've done it is because it helps develop schema. For the 5th week I shall be doing retesting, so I shall start with the same drill as I started in the 1st week. So I'll have a sheet between the bottom half of the rugby post with a hole in the middle. The scrum half will have 10 balls, 10 metres away, pass it off the floor and see how many you can get through the target. I'll then have 10 balls and then see how fast you can pass them with hopefully a better degree of accuracy, and then how far you can pass them again with a better degree of accuracy. After all these tests are completed, I shall compare the results to the 1st week and hopefully see an improvement. First opportunity you get to play rugby is at under 6 level at a club, and this is tag rugby, which is the development of the game created for mass participation and enjoyment. Tag rugby continues through under 6s, 7s and under 8s. When you get to under 9s, you start contact, and you start on a quarter-size pitch, and throughout every age group above that, the pitch size increases until you get to under 13s level, where you play on a full-size pitch. Also under 13s level, you can start entering cup competitions such as the Black Stick Blue Cup competition. Also under 13s level, your coach can sign you up to your county trials, so this might be Lancashire or Cheshire. Here you shall have a trial to see what your skills are like in your position, and if you are able to perform these skills to a high standard, then you will be accepted onto the team. You carry on in this cup competition until you reach under 17s level, where you can start entering leagues such as the Raging Bull Colts League. After under 17s level, you can then enter. You can then start playing senior rugby. However, if you play in the front row, you've got to be 18 due to RFU regulations. When you start senior rugby, you will start at the lowest team that the club have, so it might be a 3rd team, and then hopefully you work your way up through the 2nd and then make it onto the first 15. At under 13s level, if you make it onto the county trials, a county team, every year you'll have trials again at the start of the season to see if your skills have developed. If they haven't, then you'll be released, but if they have, you'll be kept on. Again, if you're good enough at this level, then you'll be sent to academy trials. Again, these academies will assess you and see what your skills are like. Some of the academies are Sale Sharks Academy or Leicester Tigers Academy. Whilst here at these academies, you can, like at the county trials, you shall be tested every year to see that your skills are developing. And then they will keep you on if they are. If you manage to earn every year, you will eventually work your way into the B team for the senior, for the professional side. And then if you're good enough again, you shall work your way up into the first 15. Examples of professional teams are Sale Sharks or Newcastle Falcons. If you're good enough in this professional team, then you are also considered for international sides such as England or Ireland, where you can play in competitions such as the Six Nations or one of the highest goals, which is the World Cup. Finally, if you're one of the best in international levels, you're also considered for the British and Irish Lions, which is the highest level to achieve in rugby union. Some of the benefits to participating in rugby is that there is an increased hypertrophy of the heart, which leads to a higher stroke volume and therefore a higher cardiac output. And if you have a higher cardiac output, then you'll have a lower resting heart rate. And if you have a resting heart rate below 60, this is known as bradycardia. Also, playing impact sports reduces the risk of developing osteoporosis, which is a lower bone density. And if you can prevent this from happening, then you can keep playing sport for longer and therefore remain healthy. Similarly, it will also prevent the oncome of osteoarthritis, which is a degenerative joint disease caused by the wearing down of the articular cartilage. So again, if this is prevented, then you can carry on playing for longer. Also, it increases the strength of respiratory muscles such as the diaphragm, and this can lead to better gaseous exchange. A mental benefit is that it is a stress relief, as when you play sport you release serotonin. And finally, a social benefit is that you can make new friends and meet your friends as well.